So we are 1 week away from Labor Day, and back on the weekend of Memorial Day, we started a sermon series that we call by a specific name and for which we use a particular image. If you looked at the picture and looked at the title, Pathways to Christ, there were some very deliberate things contained in this image that we wanted to convey through it. Now, of course, it is a picture and everyone has their own interpretation of what it means. But the picture contains certain elements that we hoped would invite your interpretation. First of all, for the fact that there is a bright sun at the horizon, which could suggest that destination, that place that we're all headed to. If you looked at the sky may suggest to you a sunset. So now that place that we may be headed to might be that final place, that home that we believe we're all traveling towards. So this may be to you pathways not only to Christ, it may be a pathway to heaven, it might be a pathway to what is eternal, a pathway to God, a pathway to what is lasting. And then in the foreground you will notice that there are 3 paths, which is beautifully in tune with our congregational reality. We are not proposing that there's only one path, and that all of us has to stick to this one prescribed path that somehow you will come here to be told. You can see that the 3 paths are also very different. There is, of course, the one that is right in the middle, which happens to be the most narrow one. Then there's one that veers off to the left, and if you look at the one going to the left, that one is nice and broad. And then, of course, there's a 2-track one that goes off onto the right. And the foreground employs an artistic technique that sort of draws us into this place, draws us into this fork as we are contemplating these 3 options, which by implication we have a choice to make about. Now, none of these 3 paths in a discernible way makes it to the end, to the light. They veer off, they disappear over the horizon, which poses to us life's quandary. How to pick the path that I walk on. How to pick the way in which I live. How to make the choices. Do I go left? Do I go straight? Do I go right? Especially when my vision fails to give me assurance that this path that I may be picking will eventually get me there, because we have no data from this image that suggests that would be the case. What are the sources, the data points that I employ to then make this decision, left, middle, right? Especially because I can't see where either of them goes. So now if we develop this metaphor as children of God, we believe that the Bible can be a guide, can be a source of data, can give us an indication, could give us inspiration, maybe even wisdom, maybe the confidence, maybe the faith, to take one of these 3 paths, a way for us to live by, instructions and guidance that it will give. And therefore, every time when we gather for worship as we are today, we read from God's Word. Today, the first reading comes from the 15th Psalm. Now, the psalm that we are reading about today is a psalm that was used in preparation for worship. If you look this up in the Bible, and not only in the bulletin, but look it up in the Bible, you will see that it says that this is a psalm for preparation of worship. This is a psalm that prepares your mindset for this meeting, this engagement that you are about to have with God. It is entitled, Who Shall Abide in God's Sanctuary? O Lord, who may abide in your tent? In the olden days, when the people were trekking through the desert, the tabernacle was a tent structure. Who may abide, that Hebrew word suggests so much more than what we may initially think about it. It is who, for whom would it be appropriate to not just come for a fleeting visit, but to hang around, to stay, and to stay appropriately. Who may dwell on your holy hill? As you know, they often built the temples on the highest places in these cities. The hill became a holy hill, was the highest place. Who may dwell? Who may make a home there? For whom would it be appropriate to stay in God's holy place? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart. Notice how the psalm does not talk about something metaphysical. It does not talk about faith. It does not talk about believing. It does not talk about agreeing. It talks very specifically. Those who walk, i.e. live blamelessly, to whom no one can point the finger. Who do not believe what is right, who don't agree with what is right, who do not support what is right, who do what is right. And they proclaim the truth from their heart. Who do not slander with their tongue, and who do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked, the ungodly, are despised or rejected. But who honor those who fear or respect the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest to those that are disenfranchised, and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. Once again, not those who believe in these things, or those who support these things, or those who think that these are good things. Those who do these things shall never be moved. And so with Psalm 15 as a source, the psalm proposes certain principles, certain suggestions, certain guidelines for us to live by. And once again, in the vernacular of a congregational church, each and every one of you have the undisputed right to interpret this particular passage and to draw from it something under the dictates of your conscience, something that appears to you, something that you resonate with. And so it states in our bylaws, dictates of your conscience, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, not just my conscience. What struck me, as I pointed out to you personally, all the active verbs, the emphasis on living and doing. And this idea of actually concretely having to make choices, having to take a fork in the road, having to choose a path, resonates with James, from whom we read from the first chapter. But one is tempted by one's own desire, being lured and enticed by it. So James is suspicious if we draw only from our own conscience, only from our own impressions to make our decisions. Then when that desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And that sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death. So now comes his petition. Do not be deceived, my beloved. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, the very sun at the horizon, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gives us birth by the word of truth, so that we could become a kind of first fruits of his creation, the best of the harvest. Verse 19. You must understand this. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. You see, so when James has the opportunity here to develop a beautifully striking philosophical reality, a treatise on how we should bring into our awareness a philosophy of life, an approach of life, what does he talk about? Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, because your anger does not produce what God desires of you, righteousness before God. Therefore rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the implanted word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and, on going away from the mirror, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, the law of love that sets us free, and persevere even in the face of opposition, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act. They will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious or faithful or people of faith, and they do not bridle their tongues, which suggests that it is possible to put a bridle and manage it, but deceive their hearts, their religion or their faith is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled, not tainted, before God the Father, is this: to care for orphans and widows, the disenfranchised in society, in their need and in their distress, and to keep oneself unsustained by the world. So I learned an awful lot from our family vacation that we had all just returned from. You should never travel with children. That's not what I learned. Mine are grown. We had a great vacation with the kids, with the family in South Africa, which has beautiful places to visit and to get reacquainted with. But I learned a lot, much of the things that any one of you would also learn when you travel away from Short Hills to Jasper, Alabama. You would learn lots of the same things. If you travel to another country, which some say Jasper, Alabama would be, there comes an awareness, because with that distance comes an objectivity about your surroundings and the world that you take for granted, or the world that you've become accustomed to, or the world that you have adjusted to. So along with all the usual preparations of packing, which takes a while, and all the gifts for the cousins and the nephews and the nieces and all these things, I had to also prepare myself for one other thing that always happens when you travel to another place and visit family: the questions that you are asked. You see, one of the things about living in these here United States, it having such a wild international visibility, are all these questions that are thrown out, sometimes seemingly very casual, and become topics for furious debates. Examples of such past debates are, for example, the huge subsidies that the US government give their farmers and agriculture, which is squeezing farmers everywhere else in the world. So visiting my in-laws, a farming community, how would you answer that one? I mean, what do I know about agricultural economics? Then, of course, there is the US foreign policy in the Middle East and the involvement in Iraq and how that offset the balance in the Middle East. How exactly am I supposed to answer that? The ethos of the Hollywood set, their lifestyles, their multiple marriages, for crying out loud, how am I supposed to explain or give some kind of perspective? And then there is another critical little wrinkle in this whole process, and that is that because of my occupation as a minister, I also have to deal with the questions that have this very distinctly moral dimension to them. What do you, and you see when they start out with that, it doesn't matter whether the barbecue is going over there and the Cabernet is over here. When they start out with, what does your church believe about? For example, the frequent acts of gun violence in America, which is supposed to be such a sophisticated society. I mean, what on earth am I supposed to say? Our church is against it? What is the answer? So as we were packing, I prepared myself that sitting casually around the barbecue, somebody will drop a gem into the conversation. And I prepared because the context against which we left for this vacation was, first of all, Caitlyn Jenner's coming out to the world. There's plenty of questions they could ask me about that. Then, of course, there is the marital rights inequality for all people, that there technically is no more gay marriage, there is just marriage. Then, of course, the police action in the inner cities and all of the protests. So who thought that this was going to be a vacation at all? So two things happened. And two topics dominated all of these casual conversations, these inquisitions that are more. The first one was Cecil the lion. Cecil the lion. Lion was 13 years old. Cecil was a very famous lion. He was part of an Oxford University research project. Cecil lived in Hwange, beautiful reservation in Zimbabwe. It's a beautiful place. It turns out that Cecil, ironically, is named after Cecil John Rhodes. So it turns out that Cecil was lured away from the reservation, and that he was tracked by an American dentist, which is why I got this question, from Minnesota. He shot him with a bow and arrow, wounded Cecil, and then he tracked him for 40 hours before he shot him to death with a rifle this time. So now he shot Cecil away from the actual location and in a different manner than his permit allowed. I did not know that Cecil had this close following, and that people in South Africa had this deep, passionate association with Cecil. I had to field questions about the brutality, about the excessiveness of a $50,000 permit to come and shoot this king of the jungle. It was intrusive. It was also suspicious. Turns out that this poor American dentist from Minnesota had shot a bear not too long ago, and he shot that bear 40 miles away from where he was also permitted to shoot the bear. And then he paid $20,000 in bribes to the people in his hunting party to hush up about it and not talk about it. And when he got found out, he was fined $3,000 and he was put in probation for a year. Did I really know any of these things? The other topic was Mr. Donald Trump. Not his manner, not his hair, but that Mr. Trump could lead in all the polls. I was asked to explain, on behalf of this great nation, how it is that this seems to be the best that America has to offer. And I try to explain that it's going to take 18 months for us to try to answer that question, whether in fact he is the best that America has to offer. Such was my vacation. I'm very happy to be home. You see that when you are home and you don't travel and you don't take maybe that step away and you don't deal with the preparation of wondering how your world is perceived, and the kinds of questions that you may have to field about your world. If you don't travel, you may become so engrossed, so adapted, so adjusted to the life right here in the northeast of these United States, which is very different from Jasper, Alabama. And you may become completely adjusted to this cosmopolitan, diverse, secular context that we live in every day. Our geographical reality is postmodern in every sense of the word. What does that mean? That means that as part of this postmodern mindset, everything is questioned. There is no one thing that any group would at any point in time feel obliged to agree to. This is the place where the world is your oyster, and where our expression, such as to each his own, is founded on that freedom of expression and liberty and the idea of movement and pursuit of happiness that each and every one can do. This is where there is one big tent, and we live in that tent. This is where people have licenses. And even if big game hunting is not your thing, and someone else is prepared to pay $50K to go shoot a lion, beautiful creature as it is, we would say, well, good for you. To each his own. You may take the person on, but the reality is that people pursue and do paths that they are interested in, compelled to, motivated to. This is where people have also intangible licenses to say what they believe, to do what they're interested in, to apply their time and their money in ways in which they do. This is also where tradition can be made on your own. where there is no pressure about on a Sunday morning, as in other parts of this country and other parts of South Africa and other parts of the world, on a Sunday morning is a good time to go to church. No more. Here, a Sunday morning is a good time for Starbucks and for soccer and for church, or all of the above. And everyone can pick their choices. We live in the midst of one huge spaghetti crossing. There are not just three paths around us. There are not just three choices that we make through life. There are not just three ways in which we can get to that ultimate destination. Not just three. It is a spaghetti crossing. It is a plethora of pathways to meaning and to purpose and to enlightenment and to what is eternal. And you see, with freedom of pursuit and happiness constitutionally guaranteed, as it ought to be, everyone has the freedom. There's no pressure to conform. You can choose your own path. You can pick out the spaghetti that you want. And you can pursue and follow that. Tradition, only if you want to. Habit, can create your own habits. Culture, do whatever it is that appeals to you. And personified by the selfie stick, you can just walk around and hold out in front of you, and you could be the center of the universe. And the picture of Times Square is no longer a picture of the other people in Times Square. It is now primarily with you in the foreground. You and Times Square. And so in this culture, we have moved from healthy individuation, potentially to self-infatuation, narcissistic obsession with me, myself, and I. And so it is perfectly fine to buy a license, to pick a license, to create a license, to kill the king of the animals, to live social, culturally, or spiritually in a way that I see fit. And from pop psychology came the message for many decades that for me to be true, I have to be true to what is important to me, to what I believe to be my talent, my dream, my future. To be true in the world of spaghetti crossings often suggests that it is my insight, it is my business school acquired skills, it is my network, it is how I define my roles, it is how I step up to my responsibilities. It is basically what I see as important, which is qualified as important. But if I wish to be true as a child of God, if I wish to provide an understanding of that as a child of God, that I am in Christ true, I am not true, first of all, to me, myself, and I. I live trying to be true to what I perceive and understand to be my very origin. To be true means that I become aware of the path that I have been on to this day. To this day. The medical procedures I have survived. The family tragedies that have broken my heart to the point that I thought they would never mend again. So that I can look back and not really understand how it is that I kept it all together. Because so much of what we live through makes no sense. To be true as a child of God means that I have an appreciation that what I have and what I am, resources, opportunity, context, are gifts, blessings, undeserved, graciously given. As a child of God, for me to be true means that I have an appreciation that through the Word of God, through the interaction with other children of God, I have an understanding of what is right. I have an understanding of what is lasting. I have an understanding of all of the choices that I can make, but not all of such choices are healthy and wise and lasting. So James, when he wrote this letter, talked about the forks in the road that Yogi Berra also talks about. Because the crazy thing about a fork in the road, 3 or more, is that we have to take them. Because such is life. Today we move from here forward to an opportunity. to an experience. Tomorrow morning you move, and so we go from day to day, facing these forks in the road. And the children of God, because there is only limited data about the roads that we have to pick. The children of God, because we can only see so far, they do not choose these paths by eyesight. The children of God do not live by sight, they live by faith. Because the children of God do not walk alone. You see, it is by the grace of God that God shows us the path. So the choice to make about the road, the choice to make about the fork, is one that God shows us. And that is our confession, that in God's presence there is fullness of joy. That in God's right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Amidst all of the voices in our world, in our lives, here in the Northeast, arguably the finest country in the world, there is the voice of God guiding us. There is the presence of God supporting us. There is the grace of God picking us up when we lose our way.